Today we're going to dive into one of the biggest, most foundational debates in all of Christian history. And it all boils down to one question. How is a person made right with God? Is it about following all the rules perfectly, or is it something else entirely? I mean, this single question sparked a revolution in thinking, so let's get into it.
Seriously, think about it for a second. Maybe you start a new hobby, or a diet, or some big project at work. You're full of passion, you've got a clear goal, but then, slowly, the joy just gets buried under this mountain of complicated rules and checklists. And pretty soon, you can't even remember why you started in the first place. Well, that's exactly the crisis we're exploring today.
So, our story kicks off with a community of people who were so turned around, so confused, it was almost like they were under some kind of spiritual spell.
See, these Christians in a place called Galatia, they started their spiritual journey in a really simple way, a relationship of trust with God. But then, this new teaching started to creep in, a voice telling them, hey, faith is a good start for sure, but to be truly complete, to be really right with God, you need to add this whole checklist of religious laws and rituals.
And that was the Apostle Paul's reaction. I mean, you can just feel the urgency, right? This isn't just a mild disagreement. It's a full-on cry of alarm. He's basically shouting, what happened to you? Who put this spell on you that has so completely clouded your thinking? Yeah, the situation was that serious.
Now, to be clear, Paul didn't think they were under a literal magic spell. The word he uses here implies someone who should know better, someone who can think clearly but is just failing to. It's like their minds had become so muddled that they were forgetting the most basic core truth they had started with.
So, to try and break this spell, Paul launches into his first major argument. He shows them that trying to earn God's approval by keeping a bunch of rules is, well, it's a completely unwinnable game. And here you can see the two competing systems just laid bare. On one side, you have the law. It's all about performance, about what you do. It's an all-or-nothing deal. Then, on the other side, you have faith, and that's all about belief, about a relationship of trust. These are two fundamentally different ways of trying to connect with God. And get this, Paul uses their own scriptures to prove his point. Just look at the key words here, all and do. The standard isn't A, just try your best, or make sure your good deeds outweigh the bad. Nope, to be right with God through the law, the standard is perfect, total, continuous obedience, no exceptions. So, this is the crucial point, right? If you choose to go down the path of the law, you have to be perfect. One slip-up, one single failure to do everything in the rulebook, and the system itself declares that you're not blessed, you're cursed. It's a standard that no human being can possibly meet. It's an unwinnable game.
Okay, so if the law is an impossible standard, was there ever another way? Paul says absolutely, and he calls a star witness to the stand, someone from centuries before the law was even given.
His key piece of evidence is Abraham, the father of the entire Jewish nation. The people teaching this legalism, they were claiming Abraham as their guy. But Paul just flips the whole thing on its head and shows that Abraham actually proves his point, not theirs.
And the foundation of Paul's entire case really rests on this one single quote from Genesis. So, how was Abraham made right with God? Was it a long list of good deeds? No. It says he believed God. He trusted God's promise, and on that basis alone, God credited it to his account as righteousness. That's it.
And, the historical timeline here is just undeniable. First, Abraham is declared righteous because of his faith. Then, 430 years go by. Then, the law is given to Moses on Mount Sinai. What does that prove? It proves that being justified by faith isn't some new idea. It's the original way God has always related to people.
And the implication of this is it's revolutionary. Paul is saying that what makes you a true child of Abraham isn't your bloodline, it's not your religious resume, it's simply sharing the same kind of trust in God's promises that Abraham himself had.
So, this brings up a pretty logical question, right? If faith is the way, and it's always been the way, then why did God even give the law in the first place? What was its point?
This is the exact question Paul knows is coming. He can hear his audience thinking, okay, Paul, if the law doesn't save us, is it just useless? Was it a mistake? And his answer is a resounding no way.
Paul uses this brilliant metaphor. He says the law was our tutor. But you got to understand, this isn't like a modern school teacher. In those days, a pedagogos was a household slave whose job was to guard and discipline a child. They were like a guardian, protecting the child and walking them to their real teacher,
It was always meant to be a temporary, protective role.
So how did the law act as this tutor? Well, you can think of it in 3 steps. First, it showed us God's perfect, holy standard. Second, by showing us that standard, it acted kind of like a jailer, proving we could never meet it, and basically locking us up in our own failure. And that brings us to step 3. It forces us to look for a way out, which leads us directly to the only one who can set us free, Christ.
So the whole point is this: the law was never, ever meant to be the final destination. It was the guardian, the guide that was meant to hold our hand, show us that we're lost, and walk us right up to the front door of the one who could actually save us. Its job is done when it brings us to Jesus.
And this brings us to the absolutely breathtaking conclusion of it all. If we are all made right with God in the exact same way, not by what we do, but by faith, what does that mean for how we relate to each other?
It means that every dividing wall we love to build just comes crashing down. In a world that's obsessed with status and division, Paul declares that in Christ the deepest social, ethnic, and gender barriers that separate us are just erased. Our standing before God has absolutely nothing to do with any of those labels.
And this is the climax of the entire argument. Because our shared identity is in Christ, we are brought into this radical, beautiful unity. It's not that our differences just vanish, but they no longer define our value or create barriers between us. We are all one. And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. If being in Christ is the single most important thing about us, more important than our nationality, our job, our social status, anything else, how does that change the way we see ourselves? And maybe even more importantly, how does it change the way we see everyone else?